I could imagine somebody hearing my story about Marquette and Second, and again, its benefits on Nicollet, its benefits on creating allowing two-way Hennepin and the bus system downtown to function. I could imagine people saying, "Oh well, that's a nice thought, Peter, but that's not a parallel experience with Hennepin Avenue, because Hennepin Avenue is a retail street. Marquette and Second aren't retail streets." Fair point. So let's talk about Washington Avenue. Let's talk about University Avenue from Washington Avenue, where it ends, all the way to downtown St. Paul. I'm talking about Green Line LRT. This is another one of these things where, we cut the ribbon and everybody, talked about the kumbaya and how great it was, which gives you a distorted picture of how unbelievably hard it was to make that project happen. So LRT was never going to work between downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul if it didn't have a dedicated lane. And in order to implement a dedicated lane, we had to make big decisions, including we basically eliminated all parking on both Washington and University Avenue all the way between the two downtowns. Now, you might say, well, between downtown Minneapolis and the river, that's not, there wasn't anything in there. That's true. But from the river, through the Minneapolis campus, through the remainder of Washington Avenue, and through University, past the border, all the way to downtown St. Paul, there basically isn't parking anywhere there anymore. And there was a lot of what you would expect, concerns from businesses about, what is this going to do to us? And mind you, that was LRT construction. That was not arterial BRT construction. That was rail construction. That was construction that lasted 3 or 4 years. And so I don't dismiss at all the concerns of businesses about construction. Construction sucks. But again, construction is inevitable if you're doing a rebuild from scratch. Even if you didn't have a dedicated transit lane at the end, you're going to have those impacts. And when you're building rail with electric power, it's basically adding a year or more onto that project. So legitimate concerns raised, but there were also concerns raised, including in Stadium Village, all along the corridor, about the loss of parking afterwards. And I'll try to see if I can find the videos for you, but there was a multi-city entity called the Central Corridor Funders Collaborative, and they interviewed people along the way, along the corridor, including the owner of Midway Books, at Snelling University, about how terrible it was that they were going to lose, after enduring construction, then they were going to lose parking, in front of their businesses, and what a disaster that was going to be. And they interviewed people afterwards, and everybody said, yeah, it turned out to be fine. I mean, don't get me wrong, construction still sucked, and St. Paul and Minneapolis went to great lengths to try and maintain business access during construction, and I assume the city's going to do that here, and they should, and people should patronize businesses during construction, and they can, and they did here, and they should here. They did on the Green Line, and they should here. But the idea of, if we don't have parking after the fact, that's going to ruin the businesses, was disproved on Green Line between the two downtowns. It's been disproved all around the country on similar projects, because here's the thing, and landlords can't always appreciate this, but if you talk to workers at businesses, they often can appreciate this. It turns out that transit riders are customers.
Yeah.
It turns out that people who move into new buildings, transit-oriented development, are even more customers. And this has been, it was documented by the Central Corridors Funders Collaborative. The ridership exceeded estimates like 10 years in advance, ridership targets 10 years in advance. And as if it didn't succeeded on day one, it also continues to succeed because it's attracting people to the corridor who want to use the facility. I see it every day, biking my daughter on our cargo bike to her preschool in Dinkytown. We're counting the cranes. The development we talked about is still happening. It's fantastic. So I don't dismiss the concerns about construction impacts, but this idea that therefore we should use COVID now as a justification for after, it's stacking exaggerated fear on exaggerated fear to say that the businesses are not going to be able to succeed. We should We should do everything we can to help them succeed, including, non-corridor parking strategies, and the city has tools for that, and I hope they roll those out. But if the transit lane falls victim to that, that is operating outside of best practices, not just from around the country, but from our very own region.
I can assure you those people exist, because I remember very vividly when I moved to Minneapolis, I looked, where are the buses? Where are the grocery stores? I was drawn to this area because I would be able to live without a car, because I could ride the bus, because it was bikeable. Like, it matters. It draws people in. People will be riding these buses. People will choose to live here because of the BRT with the bus lane. That is real.
Oh, it's absolutely real, and frankly, that's another topic of conversation at the Capitol. If we've educated people with state dollars in Minnesota public schools, where do you want them to go after they've graduated? Do you want them to go to Seattle and Denver and bring their talents to other regions? I'd prefer that students educated in Minnesota public schools can stay here, and we know that they are attracted to places like, because I see them every day along the Green Line as an example. I want to tell you one other quick thing, if I could, about the Green Line, because while parking was eliminated all the way in between the two, on the university campus, and this is the big fight that I think at least some of your listeners will remember, is we not only eliminated parking, we eliminated all private auto traffic from a portion of the university campus. And let me tell you, the same dynamic, the university dynamic of that same story plays out. The workers at the hospital, the nurses at the hospital, the students at the students on campus, we got a lot of supportive comments. But the administration at the U and some wealthy donors and doctors at the hospital who wanted their preferred parking, they still have parking, by the way, but they wanted to be able to access it from either direction, made it seem like this was going to be the hospital would cease to function, the university would be a disaster. The university administration disparaged their own students, and it ended up that they're all going to be drunk and they're going to be walking across the tracks and they're going to get killed. And I'm thinking to myself, you understand they're in greater danger from the trucks that are on Washington Avenue right now than they are from the train, which doesn't swerve. It's very predictable in how it behaves. They were disparaging their own students who were going to be drunk and killed. And what needed to happen was Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the Metro Transit all kind of ganged up on the university to say, you got to do this and you got to do this right. And we did the studies. We leaned heavily on our professional staff at the city, and they figured out that, no, if we close it from Pleasant to Walnut, we're going to be fine. And they had the numbers to show it, the same kind of numbers. Alan Klugman is not a radical. When they say that their initial recommendation on Hennepin Avenue will work, I trust them. But powerful people with money, made it really painful. There were times when I was worried we were gonna jeopardize federal funding because the university threatened to sue over it. But the city of Minneapolis did what was necessary, and this city council can do it. Again, most of these votes have been unanimous, including these. The city did the right thing. They took a strong line. They had a vision for the future. They did it then, and they can do it again. And I don't mean 13 Cam Gordons. I mean the entire city council. Moderates, progressives, they all, for all these 12 votes, including that one, they decided to move forward into the future and not be afraid of it, but to shape it rather than be afraid of it.
Yeah, this is not some far out scheme. The city has professional public works staff. We have plans and policies adopted. Like, this makes all the sense in the world, as long as you're not caving to some knee-jerk reactions. Like, I was going to make this my closing thought here before we go to you for your closing thought. Driving is so incredibly easy and convenient in this city, and let's sacrifice a tiny bit of that. And it's an extremely tiny bit of that convenience that we're going to sacrifice here, because driving and parking will still be incredibly easy. I don't know if people realize this if they haven't both been in a car and on a bus, the difference in convenience there. Like, we're asking for the tiniest of compromises to make such a huge improvement to the transit experience on Hennepin Avenue. Let's consider both sides here. Maybe get on a bus one of these days and travel that way. See how that works for you.
That completely resonates with me. And let me just add this. The legitimate concerns and the just plain fear of change can all get mixed up together, like fear of construction and fear of the design afterwards. I look at this design and I say to myself, people are going to love this. They're going to love it when it's done. If we can do what was brought forward, the initial recommendation, it is going to be the kind of thing that attracts people. They rescued this old building in Prospect Park. There's a couple old buildings. There's the Malcolm Yard's food court. You're not supposed to call it a food court because that sounds like a mall, but there's the O'Shaughnessy Distillery. There's the Surly Brewing. It's people love it. They come here for this kind of thing, and the way you get past this is to respect the legitimate concerns, but not and try to accommodate them, but not sacrifice the design in such a way where it's messed up on at the beginning and has to be fixed later. The other thing that I took from that experience is that when they said the university is opposed, well, the university wasn't opposed. It's a group of constituencies, and there were a lot of people within that. And I think if people talk to people who work at businesses in Uptown and work and live along the corridor, I mean, you've seen the data already. This design was popular. Didn't I see it was over 70% support in something that Katie Jones emailed me? You know this stuff better than I do. Ultimately, just like with Marquette and Second, just like with Green Line, the real question is, whose city is this? Whose city is this? The ridership is low because of COVID argument isn't actually the real reason we're having this conversation about potentially downgrading a great design. That's the rationale. It's not the reason. The real reason is because some property owners, some donors have more political power than all of the many, many, many people who would benefit from a safer, pro-transit, pro-climate design. That's the real question. The real question is, whose city is this? And when we decided on Mark II that it was everybody's city, when we decided on Green Line that it's everybody's city, when the city council decided 12 times this is everybody's city, we realized that it was successful afterwards. And we had no regrets. We could potentially, and forgive me, I have one last, the other thought here is what Minneapolis does really matters. We are the biggest city in Minnesota. We lead the upper Midwest. I'm visiting Duluth and Rochester to talk about things that they're doing, arterial BRT in Rochester, dedicated bike lanes in Duluth. And I'm talking in these communities because they're inspired by what Minneapolis has done. If we can't do this here in a progressive city, like if we can't do the best version, the version that maximizes the value of this state investment, if we can't do that here, it sends a really bad message. It sends a really bad message.
Yeah, we can set an example. If it's going to succeed anywhere, it's going to succeed right here in Hennepin Avenue. I know this. I live here. This is the place to set the standard. We can do it if we just follow what the professionals are telling you your plans and policies say that we should do. Peter Wagenius, I think we're done. This was a great conversation. Thank you for joining me.
You bet. Happy to be here. Katie Jones said I would have fun. I had fun. Okay. Thank you for drawing attention to this. It's really important.
Thank you, Katie, for vouching for me.
I didn't need her to vouch for you, by the way. But there's a big grassroots movement that is pushing for this, and I appreciate what you're doing, what she's doing, what everybody is doing to make sure everybody's voice is heard. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter Wagenius.